everyone, and thank you so much for joining me on LinkedIn Live today. I'm excited to leverage this new format to share these exclusive conversations with you, which are samples of the in-depth updates and briefings and interviews you can find at our award-winning cybersecurity conferences and summits. And if you haven't already, make sure that you register to attend our live virtual event next week, the Florida and Caribbean Virtual Cybersecurity Summit, which you can find at dataconnectors.com/Florida. In addition to plugged-in leaders like Florida State CIO Jamie Grant, whom we'll hear from in a moment, we're also delighted to have Mrs. Jeanette Nunez, Florida's Lieutenant Governor and Chair for the state's Cybersecurity Task Force, as well as Miami's innovative and forward-thinking mayor, the Honorable Mr. Francis Suarez. Also, at the summit next week, we'll hear from a number of cybersecurity leaders from a host of the Caribbean nations. This is an area that has long been underserved, and I personally spent a great deal of time connecting with executives and devising better ways for our community to serve them. So on today's brief discussion, we'll have Florida Chief Information Officer Jamie Grant up the newly minted Florida Digital Service. He's been tasked with developing the state's first ever enterprise approach to technology and has been working to deploy a Center of Excellence model. He's a third generation Floridian, and he has a deep understanding of the tech sector, building innovative growth organizations and cutting through government bureaucracy to get things done. As a preview of his keynote for next week, he'll answer 10 questions about the state of cybersecurity, how Florida plans to stay ahead on the leading edge, and what you should know as a private sector executive from his point of view. This will be an interactive conversation, partly fueled by your questions, just as our live discussions are at our summits. So with Mr. Grant and Data Connectors Chief Strategy Officer Michael Hiskey, I'm so pleased to welcome, I'm not supposed to say Mr., but I'm going to say Mr. Jamie Grant. Thank you so much for being here, Jamie. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Don.
Yeah, Don, thanks a ton.
All right.
I'll just call you Jamie. Okay, so
Perfect.
is that okay? Are we going to be that sort of informal?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much, Don. Doing so much for the community, Florida and the Caribbean, and there's so much cybersecurity happening and so many things. I want to get to it right away. We've got 10 questions. You can submit your questions as well. So please use the LinkedIn Live feature where you could submit questions in real time. I will see them. We'll share some information in a moment. As we get started, Jamie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, sir?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. It's great to be with you, and thanks, Don. Kind of one of the questions I get a lot is how did you end up where you are? And it's kind of been an interesting transition to go from a recovering lawyer and full-time entrepreneur in the tech space with a real focus on healthcare and data interoperability to becoming a full-time bureaucrat, as my friends like to remind me, as the Chief Information Officer for the state. It's an interesting transition, right? When you think about growing in startup mode and trying to find values that the market's going to reward, to kind of going to the other end of the life cycle to say, okay, you are the steward in some capacity of the 16th or 17th largest economy in the world, right? The state of Florida would qualify for the G20 if it was a sovereign nation. And yet we've never really deployed a meaningful enterprise-wide approach to the way we treat technology. So when I was offered the opportunity to come do it, it was kind of a chance of a lifetime, and spend every day kind of clashing into bureaucracy to try and solve problems. Not all that undifferent to the entrepreneurial background. It's just it's a different type of problem, but it's a real honor to get to lead the digital service and kind of take Florida through a little bit of a remodel, but also launch a startup from within government.
So what's it like as a recovering lawyer to be in this role? Like, what's the day-to-day like?
So I joke that my law degree is kind of this little tool in the back of the quiver. It's an arrow in the quiver that I pull out when I need it. When somebody says, yeah, you can't do that because of CGIS, or you can't do that because of HIPAA, or there's a data sharing agreement I need you to sign. My law degree kind of becomes a little bit of an equalizer where I can joke around with people a little bit and say, look, as a recovering lawyer that only practiced for a few years, here's some questions I have. And it tends to be a little bit disarming, right? To be able to talk technical, both from a legal context and to be dangerous enough technically in an engineering context. I think has been helpful in my career to be able to get to the heart of the matter. And make sure that we're asking the right questions, right? Like as a lawyer, when I represented tech clients, I always told them, or any client, my job was to try and get to yes, but to make sure I didn't get to yes until they could rely on yes. And it's kind of the same thing as the steward of the digital service.
So speaking of the digital service, can you talk a little bit about your mission in a little more detail?
Yeah, I mean, the mission is to transform the way government services are delivered. And so I'm a little bit of a unique state CIO in the sense that I don't have the Office of Information Technology, the help desk, getting your workstation fixed, your internet goes out, or even the state network. We have rulemaking authority that's very broad, very expansive, that covers everything from an enterprise architecture, cybersecurity, cloud first, or modernization policies, and then project oversight of technology projects. So from a governance or authority perspective, there's a lot of things we can do to create standards and promote a center of excellence. And so when we really look at how we're going to transform the way that a Floridian consumes hopefully improved services, we really break it down through the verticals of the digital service that kind of cross-function work together. The chief data officer for the state of Florida reports to me, the chief information security officer, service experience, which is really just a rebranded way to say solution delivery and design, and then modernization and infrastructure, the state's data center, and getting that situated. So we have a really, really broad set of responsibilities that roll up into that mission. I like to say I have an impossible job, and that keeps me fired up every day to keep coming back.
So we do the impossible every day. And that's kind of what you were appointed to this role, obviously, by Governor DeSantis and Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Nunez. We're super excited to have her at the virtual cybersecurity next week as well. Now, Dawn mentioned she was the chair of Florida's cybersecurity task force, and that's kind of evolved. That group has kind of graduated, and you're part of it as well. Is that right?
Yeah, so kind of one of the number one roles in task force, my experience, I've been a legislator for about 10 years, when I say kind of part-time policymaker and full-time entrepreneur. I had never confronted a task force that was worth a darn. Usually a task force was an excuse to have a meeting about a meeting and get people together to brag about being on a task force. I joined this cybersecurity task force in the fourth quarter. It was a 2-year task force. My appointment came right about the 6-month mark left. And I quickly found that this was a different type of task force. This was a task force that was delivering real results. And what came out of that actually was the conclusion and recommendations of that task force, including a recognition that the task force was so substantive with industry experts and policymakers or executives that could implement and govern, that the legislature this year and the governor expected to sign legislation that creates an ongoing advisory council to make sure that in my role or in the lieutenant governor's role, we have consistent ongoing access and collaboration with private sector stakeholders, subject matter experts, and leaders. And I think that's what you see as a recipe for real success.
That's amazing. And really, it's kind of been indicative of the sort of get or done attitude that the whole administration has taken to Florida. And I really respect watching it from the sidelines. So overall, what should we look forward to hearing about in your keynote next week at the Florida and Caribbean Virtual Cybersecurity Summit?
I think what folks should look forward to hearing is kind of where we are and where we're going. I think that anytime you come in to make change or to do transformation, I think there's 2 things you really have to focus on. How far is the journey and what's the tolerance for speed? In this case, maybe the third is what's the expected outcome? And I think anybody who's in the cybersecurity world in any capacity, impacted or front lines, understands that we don't have time to be safe. We don't have the opportunity to be risk averse. And we can't play scared. We've got to be bold. We've got to be innovative. And we've got to figure out a way to, in my case, secure the state of Florida in a way that it's never been secured. I'm proud of the fact that this governor, my boss, has asked the legislature, and they delivered, with the largest investment ever in the state's history, $30 million to deploy enterprise solutions in cybersecurity. I recognize that this audience may first say, well, gosh, that's not going to get you very far. It will in this world if we can establish and prove the outcome set to scale. And I think it's been very clear that this is the beginning. This is the commitment to a start, and that you will see the state of Florida continue under Ron DeSantis' leadership and Jeanette Nunez's leadership to lead on this front, understanding the threat that we face every single day and the volume of threats that we face every single day. To solve it, we're going to have to be creative, and we're going to have to recognize the power of partnership. The Center of Excellence is inherently predicated on the fact that we're not going to have all the answers inside of government, that we're not going to have the arrogance to pretend we do. but that we align with subject matter experts and leaders that can collaborate with us so that we can bring the expertise that we have, in my case, either in the private sector experience or in the policymaking experience, meshed with cybersecurity professionals and leaders that can collaborate on a plan that makes Florida a leader moving forward and a blueprint moving forward for the states, the localities, and the federal government to follow.
That's a big agenda and a lot of stuff to do. And I'm looking forward to hearing a lot more at the keynote. So without giving it away, we sort of hinted at, so maybe there's some interesting insights about the water utility hack from Oldsmar earlier this year. So in 20 seconds, without giving anything away, what is it?
Interesting mashup. First of all, Oldsmar is in the district I used to represent, right? So it was kind of an interesting opportunity for me to call people I knew and friends I knew to be able to say, hey, we'll send a team down to help give you an independent set of eyes to help out. And so I think a couple things with respect to Oldsmar. You'll get some insights into how we operate as the digital service and what our Chief Information Security Officer suite is doing and is aligning to do. The solutions we deploy, but also just the culture, right? Getting people to understand we're here to help. I think what Oldsmar showed us is what most of us already know. When you look at the ICS landscape, we've got to quit thinking just in terms of IT. We've got to start educating policymakers and people that operational technology, industrial control systems, and the like are every bit as dangerous and vulnerable as a database. And in some ways can actually impact our citizens more. I throw it out this way. We'll talk about it during the keynote. But I think most of our constituents probably think that Colonial was a bigger deal than SolarWinds. I think most of us who are in the business understand that SolarWinds had a much more expansive impact. It's just that Colonial was tangible. We saw people filling gasoline up in plastic bags. We had the inability to get gas for a few days, and so it made it real. The real challenge with cybersecurity is how we educate people to understand that there may not be a tangible or physical impact, but that there's harm at least threatened every day, and our job is to mitigate it.
Yeah, I mean, really kind of a run-of-the-mill ransomware attack, Colonial Pipeline. Shame that they paid it out and sort of a lot of interesting revelations. But, hey, if it brings more awareness that all of us could take advantage of and get more budgets and get more help from other parts of the organization, we'll take it, right?
Yeah.
So to my knowledge, Jamie, it's really unusual for us as citizens to sort of get an idea of what our elected and appointed officials, such as yourself, even think about cybersecurity, like what their day-to-day is like. So why is that? And what do you think could you preview in terms of the administrations and yours? And hey, even Mayor Suarez will hear a little bit of. What do you think that those officials think about day-to-day with regard to cybersecurity?
So I think it depends on who you're with, right? But if we think about, a source of truth framework to create digital transactions, it all starts with, do I want to have this transaction with that person? Is that person who they represent themselves to be? Are there permissions in place to complete the transaction? I think that's the same kind of construct that happens in a non-digital or qualitative world every day in a sociological construct. You and I get together and we have conversations about what we think should be happening or shouldn't be happening and create ideas. I think one of the things, Michael, that drew me to relocate to Tallahassee, take this opportunity, first and foremost, a boss and an executive that's all in. I don't think you can make transformational change if the executive isn't backing. We've also got legislative authority and now legislative funding to make some real difference. So this is a different day in Florida with respect to a technology office. But then I think the third thing is everything else has been tried. And I get to do this my way. I'm a startup guy. I love startup. I joke with my friends that if I'm ever the CEO of a publicly traded company, sell. Because it's just way too bureaucratic at that point, which may sound ironic for the role I'm in right now. But truly, this is kind of like launching a startup and the tools are in place. I think it's important for us to create clarity with how to transact with us. If I'm going to say that partnership and interaction and thought leadership and dialogue and debate are going to be central to sharpening our swords here as professionals inside the digital service, we need to create clarity of expectation for what the digital service is, what the digital service does, and how people can best partner with us.
Outstanding. So turn that around. If you were a civilian on the other side of this, why would it be important to you to know what your elected and appointed officials think about cyber?
Well, I think it depends on I'm going to give you the lawyer answer here. It depends, right? If I'm in the business development role, I want to know what the biggest priorities are, and I want to know how to do business together. And so to me, streamlining procurement, placing standards on deliverables, if people haven't paid attention, I'll just tell you frankly that the biggest priority on the cybersecurity front is to transform what we buy moving forward, because that's the first way I can stop the water coming over the boat for some of the challenges we have. Moving forward, we'll start remediating what we have. So things like endpoint detection and endpoint management and a SIEM and a SOC and asset inventories and all sorts of things that a lot of your members and visitors to this summit will say, yeah, that's just baseline cybersecurity. We're kind of starting at baseline here, and it's okay to acknowledge we're starting at baseline. Pretending we're not at baseline does nobody any favors. But you'll see us first focus on how to transform the procurement landscape, because one thing is true. Government has shown no intuition or has shown me nothing to suggest it knows how to buy software or buy technology of any kind. And that's the first place we're going to start. So somebody who wants to be a part of that, or somebody that's going to be impacted by it, should know that Florida might be interested in saying, before we buy technology, let's just take software. Maybe it makes sense to have a pen test and a load test and documentation and validation of a test environment that replicates production before we use a tax dollar to buy something in that space. Simple standards like that have never been deployed. It's our biggest focus. It'll apply to everything we do, but it'll also be the biggest thing we can do to start the momentum to secure Florida's digital infrastructure.
Yeah, I imagine the organizations, Jamie, that are accustomed to selling solutions to the Florida state government, they don't know what to do when you're on the other side of the table. This is a whole new ball game. This is like selling to a startup, and I'm in a bureaucratic office. I've got to go call some other salespeople.
My goal and the way I would define it is that you shouldn't need a translation layer to sell to me. You shouldn't need a professional to tell you how government procurement works or what a 3-letter acronym is. You should be able to show up and hear from me or my team what we need in the way of a value and propose the most meaningful solution and get on to deploying it. I want to streamline that process. And right now there's just so many, it's like one side of the table speaking calculus and the other side speaking Mandarin, and yet we expect dialogue and clarity to happen. Yeah. The first thing we're going to do is streamline communication and expectations.
That's outstanding. Well, look, we love what you guys are building over there. It sounds like you're staffing up. So if I were a with it cybersecurity individual and I wanted to come work for you in Florida, what do I do?
2 things. Fastest way for the purpose here is just find me on LinkedIn. Let's throw my LinkedIn account if we can in the chat so people have it there. We'll make sure to route them to the site where listings occur. We are actually looking for cybersecurity professionals right now. And so if you'll shoot me a message there at my LinkedIn account, I'll make sure we get that. We get somebody in contact with you and we get you routed away to apply.
That's outstanding. Well, those were 10 questions, believe it or not. Some of them came in from the audience and they were fast. I just want to take a couple minutes briefly while we still have Jamie on to talk about the upcoming summit. The Florida and Caribbean Virtual Cybersecurity Summit, Data Connectors is proud to have been putting on virtual summits for the past 1.5 years. This is another of our virtual gatherings. We'll talk about Florida's state of cybersecurity and a continuation of this conversation from Mr. Jamie Grant. We'll also hear from, as we said, Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Nunez and Miami Mayor Francis Suarez will also make a special guest appearance as well as a host of solution providers, expert panel discussions. It's a whole lot of fun, so I hope you can make it. There's also coming up a really interesting symposium. So Jamie, the Secret Service, who I know you're partnered with there, and you've spoken to some of those individuals, asked us if we could host their romance scam symposium. So romance scams are sort of the gateway. Sounds
like my dating life
of cybersecurity, right? It's sort of it leads people down a nefarious path, and apparently, and I didn't know this years ago, without romance scams, the business email compromises wouldn't work, and money mules are sort of gained through romance scams. It's incredible.
When you think about points of entry, people, I put it in terms of phishing, literally phishing. We're used to going and find lures that look fishy, right? Threat actors are going to find what looks fishy. And so whether it's, the Nigerian prince 15, 20 years ago that wanted to send me $20 million or anything in between, the purpose of phishing is to make it attractive. And we kind of laugh like, how come the bass keeps biting it? Well, how come we keep clicking on emails? And it's a fair question for us to ask, and how we harden our infrastructure. I'm trying to get off email as much as I can. I'm trying to get my team off of email as much as I can. Obviously, there's some level of dependence, but when we think about where the threats are, how can we maintain communication, but maybe decrease the number of vulnerabilities? But we should never expect that threat actors are not going to throw a shiny little topwater lure in front of us. They're going to throw something nice and hope that somebody takes an action that lets them in and lets them do what they are intending to do. And so we have to constantly remind ourselves that that's what they're going to do, and how do we try and mitigate it.
And really impacts your citizens there in Florida. One of the presenters for the Romance Scam Symposium, it's a lot of words, is from AARP. So romance scams tie right into elder abuse and elder exploitation, rather, I think is the word, excuse me. And just preying on people that might not be super savvy with how they touch stuff on the internet.
That's right.
So Jamie Grant, Florida State CIO, building a whole new sort of way of doing things down there. We appreciate you very much. We're really looking forward to the keynote next week. It'll take place at noon Eastern, about 12:30 Eastern, I guess I should say, on Wednesday, June 16th. Again, we have a full day agenda on that day. You'll hear from not only Jamie Grant, but some great panels, great keynote presenters. I hope you can make it. dataconnectors.com/Florida to learn more. And we will see you all there. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate you guys. We'll see you next week.